I will show you the official shortcuts to get a perfect score on the digital SAT. Hi, I'm Ryan, and I got a 1570 on my SAT. The trick is to do as many practice tests as possible so that the real test is much easier for you. Many have said that the March digital SAT was extremely difficult, and now CollegeBoard has released practice test number 5 to cover some of those more difficult problems. If you are interested in taking practice test number 5 on your own, I'll provide a link to the test in the video description below. So let's go into the first question. So here it's asking, what is the solution to this system? It already has plotted the points and the two lines where it intersects. So you just need to combine those. So it's 4 and 5, which is C. Then on the second question, it's asking for how many people will have joined the club after 4 days if 10 members are joining every day. So once again, just simple create the equation. 90 plus 10 times 4 equals 130, so B. Same here, looking for the y-intercept. Just basic knowledge, the y-intercept is where the line intersects the y-axis or the vertical bolded line. So this would be 0 and 8, where x is 0 and y is 8, so that would be D. For here, it's asking for what is the solution to the system of equations. So here, since we already know what r is, we already know this first value will be 3, and then to solve for s, we can just plug in 3 into the place of r in the first equation. So this will be s plus 21 equals 27, or s equals 6. So you got 3 and 6. Next, we got number 5. It's asking for what is the following is the best description of the function f. So first we can figure out whether or not as x increases, does f of x increase, or does it decrease? Based on that, we can know if the function is an increasing or decreasing function. So we can see as x goes from -1, 0, 1, 2, it'll go 16, 17, 18, 19, it'll be increasing. So this means that it's an increasing function, so it's either b or d. And we know it's linear because the proportions that f of x is increasing by always stays the same. So it's always increasing by 1. Increasing by 1, increasing by 1, which means it's a linear function, so it would be b. If it was exponential, you would see it go maybe 16, 17, but then maybe 19, and then maybe 23, and then 40. So it'd keep increasing. The amount by which it is increasing would also increase. Number 6, once again, just like the first two problems, it's a system of equations, but it already has the point for us, or in this case, I made it. You can see it's an easy intersection at x equals 4, which is what it's specifically looking for. Now, number 7, another knowledge-based question. So we know, many people know what the mean, median, and mode means. Range can sometimes be less taught or less known. Basically, what it is you take the highest value and the lowest value and ignore everything else and just subtract those two. So there you get 29. Number 8. So we can see here, line M is parallel to N, and K intersects both lines, and it's asking what is X? Is it less than 145, greater than, equal to, or can we not know? So in geometry, there's a theorem called the vertical angle theorem, which basically means angles of lines that are intersected, the opposite ones will always be equal. So X and 145 will be equal, just like how if we were to draw another imaginary line here, angle here, and here, those would also be equal. So we know that it's C. On to number 9. It's asking for the number of non-daylight minutes there are if we're given the number of daylight. So it's just quick subtraction, 770. Now number 10. So Scott is selecting 20 employees out of a 400 employee company, and he found that 16 of them have a certain characteristic and is finding how many estimating of the actual 400 would have the same amount of estimates. So here I created a easy, comparison. So 16 over 20, because that's how many he picked and how many had the characteristic. And then you want to know out of 400, how many will have the same characteristic. So here you can cross multiply. I didn't show it, but basically what you do is 16. Actually, no. Here you can just multiply. You want to make the bottom equal, so you multiply by 20. And that would be 16 times 20 equals 320. So you just want to make the bottom base the same so that the proportions will still stay the same, but the top will also increase to 320. Number 11. Here we can use one of the shortcuts. So it's giving us an equation and wants us to figure out what is the value of x minus 7. So a slow method would be to solve for x in the equation and then subtract 7 from that to find x minus 7. So an easy way to just shortcut this is to factor out 4 in the beginning. So you got, if you take away 4, if you factor out 4 from 4x minus 28, you get 4x minus 7 equals minus 24. And you can divide both sides by 4 to get x minus 7 equals minus 6. So you can just skip that step of having to directly solve for x, and you can just solve for x minus 7. Now on to number 12. It's asking for what would be the interval where x lies upon. So it gives us the minimum amount, which is 0.6, and the maximum amount of 1.8, which means that s has to be between that. And so it's pretty obviously it's d, the minimum, in between, and then the maximum. Now on to number 13. What you can do is you can, since we are given y equals 4x, we can plug in 4x into this y. So we get here 4x equals x squared minus 12. Then you can, I didn't write it down, but basically you can subtract both sides by 4x. So you get x squared minus 4x minus 12 equals 0. And then you can factor out x minus 6 plus x plus 2 equals 0, which means x either equals 6 or x equals minus 2 for the equation to be equal to 0. And since we know x has to be greater than 0, then we know it's a positive value or 6. Are there any shortcuts? There are other ways to solve this, like, for example, instead of plugging in 4x for y, you can actually, first in this equation, you can divide both sides by 4, so you get y over 4 equals x, and then we can plug in y over 4 into this instead, which may take a little bit more time, and it's generally the same principle, so you should just go with the first method since you already got what y is equal to. Now on to number 14. I took a long time. This one, it's basically just, you have to read it carefully and understand what it's actually asking for, which can sometimes be tough if you're rushing through all the problems, and especially since there's this whole paragraph. So here, it's asking for, basically it's saying the store is selling 2 different size containers, which each have their own different costs. And the total profit or revenue or sales was $896.86. So basically it's creating this equation where we're saying x times blank plus y times blank equals this. What is the, and it's asking what is the price. So here you just have to read it carefully. When it's saying 4.51 times x, it means, let's say you're selling 10 boxes where x is 10, your profit would be 4.51 times 10 because that's the price and that's how many you sold. So basically it's asking what's the price of the smaller container. So basically, since that's 4.51 as a coefficient, we know the price is $4.51. Now number 15, the volume of a cylinder is the area of the base times the height. We're given the height and we have to solve for the base. So in this case, we got the base diameter is 22. So you want to find the radius because you want to find the area of the circle at the bottom, which is pi r squared. So this would be 11 squared times pi and then times the height. And you can either use your calculator or you can do it in your head like how I did, which makes a C. Now number 16, given f of x, what would be f of x plus 5? So right away, you can see that if you add plus 5 to f of x, that means that every single value of f of x will be increased by 5, or the y value will be shifted up by 5. So you can see it's d. Another way to think about it is if you plugged in a value in f of x, so let's say we have 3 and then 3. So in this f of x equation, when we plug in 3, we get out 3. But if we plugged in 3 here, we would get 3 plus 5 equals 8. So if you can tell how much the y value is increasing, you can even use examples like plugging it in, then you can see that we're just shifting it up by 5, or every value is going to be increasing by 5. Now number 17, it's saying the ratio of coaches to athletes is 1 to 26, and if there are x coaches, how many athletes will there be? You can simply just set out this proportions 1 to 26, and since there's x coaches, you multiply both sides by x, so it would be x to 26x. Number 18. Kailani uses fabric, which measures 5 yards to make each suit. And it's creating an equation y minus 5x equals 6. So what I did was, basically I got y, which represents how much she purchased, how much fabric she purchased, and then equals 5x plus 6. You just move the 5x to the other side, which is the total length. So let's say she makes, once again, 10 suits. It would cost 50 yards of fabric. So this would be the total length of the suits plus 6. So in this case, it's asking, what does the 6 even mean? So we can say that here she made 6 suits. That's clearly not right because it's x representing the number of suits she makes, and we don't know that. Number B, she purchased 6 fabrics. That's not true because let's say you can just plug in easy values, or you can tell like if we made 1 suit, then the total fabric she would need would be 11 because it'd be 5 plus 6 equals 11. So it can't be B. Can't be C either because it's once again total, but we don't know how many suits she made. So it has to be D. Another easy way to just visualize it is the final amount that she purchased, or y, is equal to the total length that she needs plus 6 additional fabric. So there should be an excess or leftovers of 6, and here we can see she buys 6 more than she uses. So that proves it. Number 19 here, I mean, there are some ways you can do it without a calculator, but to save time, just use your calculator. Make sure you have to put it on radians, of course, because we're dealing with pi, not degrees. And then once you use a calculator, it'll just tell you the answer for you, which is -3. So cosine x means you're looking for the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse, so it'd be 11/28. Number 21. So it's asking what is the value of g is 0 when the graph passes through 24, 0. So what we can do is plug in these values into the equation and then solve for g of 0. So we can see if we plugged in if you plugged in 24, g of 24 equals 0, so you got 0. And then if you plugged in x equals 24, then you get 38, and then t minus 24. And so for the equation to equal 0, t has to be 24. So now that we know what t is, we can substitute t into the original equation and then solve for g of 0, which is just 14 times 24. And either you can use your calculator or do it in your head. You get 336. Number 22. This took a little bit while because I was trying to understand what is it looking for. So basically, it's given us the equation of a circle, and a certain point lies on the circle. What is the value of the x value that could lie on the circle? So I didn't have Desmos. I'm pretty sure on the digital you are allowed to use Desmos. And what you can do is just graph out the equation on Desmos. That'd be the quickest way. And then plug in x equals, for example, -16, x equals -14, x equals 11, or 19, and see if those actually land on the circle or not. If you don't have a calculator, though, I feel like the second best way is to simply plug in these values of a into x plus 4, because what you need to know is that x plus 4 squared has to be equals to 121 or less than 121. So, for example, if you plug in -16, you get -12 squared or 144, which is greater than 121, which means no value of y will ever be able to match it. So we can't have an x value of -16. Same thing for 19 and 11. All of them are greater than 121, except for -14, which is 100, which is less than that, which means that -14 is the answer. Now for number 23, understanding what the volume of a prism is, and making sure you define these variables. So you can see the length is x, which is 7 more than the width. So you may think, okay, so the width is the x plus 7. But that's not actually true. The width is actually equal to x minus 7 because x is supposed to be 7 greater than the width. So that's why it would be either C or D, and just making sure you get those slight adjustments, and it's x minus 7. Number 24, when it says minimum value, it means that the smallest value of the function is -3. So one way to easily solve this is to just disprove it. Say that there's a value that is lower than 3. And here if you plug in 1, you both get values that are lower than 3, so it's neither. Now number 25. This one is another tricky one. So what you need to understand is when you're increasing the quantity of x by 400%, you're not doing 4x equals 60. It's not 400% times x equals 60. What it's saying is when you're increasing something, you're not only adding one, you're not simply finding 1%, but you're adding it to the existing value. So here, if you're increasing by 1%, you'd have the original x plus this 1%. If you're increasing it by 100%, then you're not just doing 1 times x, but you're doing the existing value plus another 1 times x. So it'd be 2. So if you're increasing by 400%, that's actually 5x. So that's why if we create this equation, 60, which is the final answer, equals 5x, you find x equals 12, not 15, which may trick some people. On to 26. This one took me the longest, I believe, maybe around 5 minutes. So the thing is, there are many ways to approach it, and there are a lot of variables which can get you confused. So it's saying we have a function, f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c. We don't know a, b, or c, but we do know that the graph of it passes through 7, 0 and negative 3, 0, and a has to be greater than 1. So we're trying to find a plus b. So that may seem impossible at first, but remember, like we did back in problem 21, we plug in values when we're given them. For 0, we can plug it in. So we can do the same thing with 7, 0 and minus 3, 0. So we can see here, if you plug in 7, you get out 0. So 0 equals 49a plus 7b plus c. And if you plug in minus 3, you get out 0. So you get 0 equals 9a minus 3b plus c. So then you can know that, so since these are both equal to 0, we can say that those two are equal to each other. And then here we get this equation. We can cross out c because those are both constants and those are both on the same side. And then we can put like terms to the same side. So you get 48 equals minus 10b. So my first approach, which is definitely a slower and doesn't actually get you anywhere approach, was I found a equals minus 1/4 b. And we know that a plus 1/4 b equals 0 if you add a 1/4 b to both sides. Which means if b is, and then since we know a is greater than 1, that means that in this equation, b has to be negative because a equals minus 1/4 times, it has to be a negative because a negative plus a negative equals a positive. So since we know a plus 1/4 b equals 0, a plus b would be less than 0 because b is less than 1, and 4 of the negative would be even more negative. So that's why you could easily cross off c and d. And then here I got stumped because I didn't know how to find if it was whether it was a or b because they're both negative. So then I went back to the drawing board, and what I realized is that the fastest way to actually solve this problem is not through this way of trying to figure out a plus b less than 0, but rather trying to directly solve for one variable. And since we're only looking, and since we're given a lot of information about a, we can solve for a. So we know here a equals negative 1/4 b, which means if you multiply both sides by minus 4, you get minus 4a equals b. That means a plus b is just equal to a minus 4a, which is minus 3a. So minus 3a equals, and then so we get minus 3a. So we want to find out what could be a plus b. And since we know a has to be greater than 1, so we can see in this corner, since a is greater than 1, a cannot be 1. So if we have the lowest value of a, which is for maybe like 2, then that'd be minus 6. Because if it was 1, it would be minus 3, which wouldn't mean it was b, but we can't actually pick 1. So a plus b has to be greater than less than minus 3, so it'd be a. So remember, the big takeaway is whenever you have multiple variables, even in like systems of equations or problems with multiple variables, we want to cut down the variables as much as possible. So we can see here we cut down on c, and then here we cut down on b. So then we find out a, and then we can solve for that. Now let's go on to 27. This one is relatively much more simpler. We know that g7 minus w equals 0. So if we plug in g7w minus w is 0, and we can plug that into x, so we get this equation. And we want to find where w is a solution of the equation. So that means that it has to be equal to 0. So when w is 7, for example, it will be 0 times something, which would make it 0. When w is 5, it would also be 0. And when w is 13, the entire right side would be 0, which means that those 3 are the solutions, and it's asking for the sum. So we can just add it up, and that's 25. Finished Module 1 in 28 minutes and got a perfect score. Follow this channel for more tips on acing the SAT.